a little bit harder, but that doesn't bother me per se or anything like that.
That's interesting because there are people in Canada that would say that they feel like that. And maybe you have experienced that. So I don't know when you compare with Americans to Canadians.
I'm not disputing that it's hard. I'm not disputing that it's hard, and that at times I think a lot of times it can be unfair, but it doesn't dissuade. It doesn't dissuade me or anything like that from trying to pursue what I'm trying to pursue. I don't know if that makes sense.
That's
What
good.
I'm saying.
Anyone here?
I think identity is an internal construct, right? So depending on what you have seen, either being raised or your educational system and background, how you construct your identity is developed by what was around you, but it's very internal, right? So when you mentioned, I'm very proud to be Black, I'm extremely proud to be Black too. And I've had that question before, Miriam, believe it or not, when people say, do you not believe you're lacking something because you are Black? And in fact, I think I bring more to the table. I have more experiences. I see things from a Black woman perspective that maybe a middle-aged white woman or a white man might not see or experience things. We have the beautiful hijabi lady here. She sees the world very differently up there, sees the world very differently from me as well. I think we bring different lens to the same picture, to the same image, and I think you bring more to the table. That's what I would say. But you are right. It is this statistically proven that people do have had that negative self-identity on where they believe they have a deficit, and I think that's in some cases related to. It's very sad. And it's probably also related to the media and the construct of what people think is Black, unfortunately, or African. Yeah.
Yes. We are coming to that. So,
I think the question, did you go for something?
Yeah, I go to
So one of the things that like growing up in the Caribbean or even growing up in Africa, I imagine it's probably the same growing up in Africa. I never growing up had that deficit feeling because everyone I knew Black doctors, Black lawyers, Black politicians, people of power were all Black, right? I never really saw that until I moved to Toronto to go to college. And then it was like, wow, okay, so me against the world. By that time, I was already 16, and my attitude was middle finger in the air, like what I'm bringing, right? And so it's different from someone that grew up here. And even so with me, to say that there's no deficit is still kind of a false narrative, because as I get older, I realize that, yeah, I am missing that connection to Africa in terms of I've never been there. I've been told, Greg, you gotta go, right? For someone growing up in Canada, the US, that's another step of separation being removed, because now everyone that, said, everything's white. And so now you can say it's a different path to kind of finding who you are.
Okay.
Do you mind if I weigh in on that?
Yeah, sure.
As a Canadian-born Black person, I do understand what you're saying. Like, if you were born in another country where everyone around you is Black, from your mailman to your doctor to your lawyer, so on and so forth. In this country, however, even though you're told that you have no limits, when you look around, all you see is limits. I want to just use an example, if I can, real quick. My daughter went to Paris with my wife, and when she was there, she made the observation onto herself that all the Black people she saw were in labor jobs, and no Black person, like, they were either cleaning, they were either moving something, delivering something, but nobody was in charge of anything. And that is a truism here as well. And it's how the systems are designed, so that you are told that yes, you can be whatever you want to be, but we're going to put all these barricades in your way. So the statement that you made earlier, Akeem, of I have to work harder is actually you unwittingly expressing those barriers that are put in your way that you have to overcome.
No, I agree. I agree that there is barriers. I agree that there's barriers and that it's harder, but just for me personally, my mindset toward is that like I just won't let it stop. That's how I
I
feel.
agree.
That's how I feel. That's I should have explained it a little bit better
I
now.
also need to add to that, but very related, it will be short because I know we have to go to the next question. There was a job opportunity years ago, and I have a black Canadian-born friend, and I'm born and raised in Ethiopia, so similar experience. I've seen people in power, like just my parents, everything was like I saw good examples of black people. But she was born and raised here, and of course that systemic barrier is embedded somehow, right? Like you almost unwillingly accept it. And I didn't, it was like a lab job, I eventually got it, but I didn't get it, and she automatically assumed, and she said, it's because you're black. And that was not the first thought I had. It was like, what is it, the qualifications that I don't fulfill? What is it that I haven't completed? But she's like, it's because you're black, you didn't hire because you're black. And it was so automatic for her, and it's interesting in terms of like your upbringing and what thought process you have for the systemic barriers right away, which I agree with what you said.
We're going to the next question. If you want to comment, you can comment. Right. Did you want to comment?
Yeah, am I allowed to?
Sure. We are having a conversation.
Thank you. Hello. Hi. I just had a small, I find it interesting still comment, and it's based on, it made me think of it when Greg said a little about growing up in Jamaica and the demographic around him. And that's something that I think about, and it made me connect it to what software and hardware is in psychology. So I also grew up back home, West Africa, Ghana. And back home, everybody is kind of like Jamaica, mostly 99.9% black. And so when you said that, when I look around me, I see like black professionals, and that shaped you. But when you come here, you see non-black professionals. Like it's a diversity of people which will also shape you. And my comment is just on how interesting it is that you could be amongst all black people and still behave as if you're imported. And then you can also be living in Canada as a white person that appreciates diversity way more than another black person. So I thought that I wanted to share that software, hardware in cultural and identity development.
That's a good comment. That's an IT guy. Okay, let's move on to the next question. The next question is, do you think genetic tracing of ancestry has helped to reconnect some of the identity issues that we're facing in our community? Does that help?
Are you talking like Ancestry.com and that kind of stuff?
Yes.
I guess it depends on the person.
Yeah.
Different people are looking for different things in different points in their life. And for some people, that's kind of the information they need to trigger a change or a new direction or a new outlook in life. So it really depends on the person. Like I personally have never done one of those tests. I don't really think it's going to do anything for my psyche, but if it's something that will help someone else, hey, go for it.
I think that's a really interesting question there. I think that, there are a lot of people that they do like to sink their teeth into that because it is such an important part of understanding identity. What I view though, much like Greg, not somebody who's done it, I don't think I'll ever entertain the idea, to be honest. But I think that there are people that really invest in it because there's an element of appropriation as well, permission that if I understand that I'm 12% black, I can now wear my hair in box braids, or I can now start to adopt black ways. I mean, it really profoundly from that, I can use the N-word, right? Like, and then you just pull out your papers and say Ancestry said I could do that. Like, we can't do that. That to me is a really big risk of all of these things. There are the positives, absolutely, where people can go back and trace. I have mixed race children. I'm a mixed race woman coming out from Trinidad, and I have my beautiful parents here. I was born in Trinidad and was raised black. I knew nothing else. Only later in life to find out I was mixed race, because that wasn't presented to me. We were black, period. So when I think even of my own children, so often they've had to claim their identity and say it out loud for people to actually appreciate that they are descendants of African descendants and do have black blood. But I think that what becomes problematic is when we have people that use those types of tools in order to create expressions that are not truly theirs, but claims only because a certain percentage of DNA says that they are entitled to adopt that form of culture, those types of rituals. And sometimes I view that as very harmful.
Wow, well said. Yeah, I think that I'm going to move to the next question because while you asked your, because you're an educator, and I wanted to bring this to your attention because, of course, as anti-racism teacher, is the history of slavery just a footnote in the history books in Canada, or there's none at all? What can politicians or community leaders do to make sure that we have that in schools?
I think one of the other panelists had mentioned this earlier, that what we do see is that history is written by the victors. And so it is not, specifically in our high schools in Social Studies 10, we talk about the triangular trade, transatlantic slave trade. We talk about imperialism and conquest. And it is really just glossed over. We don't spend any significant time in understanding how that event has actually turned into the problems that we see in the world today. When we do talk about it, what we jump to is the African American problem. We talk about how slavery became an American issue because that's what we've grown so accustomed to looking at in terms of how that became a problem. We don't look at what was mentioned in your documentary about the Berlin Conference. We don't look at the division of Africa. Look at how the significance of leadership was decapitated in Africa. We don't spend time studying how those scientists, as you mentioned, doctors, all types of leadership, our kings, and all of those were removed and then replaced by white systems. So what we do a very poor job of in schools is talking about the truth of that history and making that history connect to what the current problems are. And then what we continue to do is perpetuate these ideals that Africa is poor. You know, we perpetuate the ideas that because of this history, Black folks will always be a victim. And so the state in which we live in is an eternal state, that those that come out of it becoming model minorities are so exceptional. Like we do not spend enough time taking a look at how that history itself has actually changed the perception of any young white child viewing a Black person. We spend a lot of time turning it into a continuation of the perspective of the conqueror.
Wow. Dr. Abiba, I'll put you on the spot. The same question. I think what you have said is, what we are not doing and what we can do and all that. So, as a leader in the community, she's a community leader herself and a politician at one point. So, I'll put you on the spot. I wanted you to answer that question as well. What can be done and how can we move forward to make sure that we get those things done?
Thank you so much, Miriam. What a wonderful panelist you have here, my goodness. where have you been when some of us were running, hey? It's really wonderful to see all of you here with very brilliant ideas that really we can reflect from and learn from. Yes, as I was talking, as the young girl was talking, she talked about conquer and divide is what I would add to. When I looked at the video and my own history in Africa, I'm from Kenya, when I was growing up, we used to learn that history, and it was we used to be taught about slavery and colonialism and how people fought back and whatnot, and how the whole system has been changed and communities fractured and whatnot. We've had that. So the only thing that is happening now is the divide and conquer is still with us here in Canada as well. But it's implicit. It's quite subtle, and it's just dividing us in the sense that one community or one country is told, oh, the people from West Africa are very good, hardworking, more educated, while some are just relying on social welfare and whatnot. So that stereotype is really the source of what's dividing us. And so if you want to fix the problem, you have to learn the history, you have to look at the present and then fix the future. I'm happy we have a lady who is really highly educated here and has been in the schooling system for quite a while. And someone also mentioned how the black young kids, I think it was you said the young ones are really, propagating the idea of being together. But I don't see that as a very sustainable way of really uniting us. And the reason is because I also raised 3 girls who are black. There's so much talking about the identity, and which I've never talked about myself, which is good. But then I was relating it or correlating it with what's really happening in the world today about George Floyd's death or Black Lives Matter movements. And so when that becomes history, and history is not being taught in school, as you said, then what? So I think, and I think most of the people who are from Africa are men, and they are those who are in position of power. But when we look at that from a gender perspective, we see more of our brothers who are in high-level positions really forgetting about their past. But when you give the same opportunity to a woman like me, then my history still stays with me and my past still stays with me, then I can impact and influence others to really influence the system to make a change, which is really a durable solution. That's not obviously happening. And so if we are to break stereotypes and remove barriers, we need to teach the history of Africans, just like it's influenced us now. We need to bring that to the classroom so that the blacks, not only from Africa, but the blacks from all over the world who are really one of the fastest growing population here, can be more united, as you said, and then we can be more impactful and have a unified voice to really bring a permanent, well, it will never be permanent, but at least, bring some inroads for our young people. It frustrates me as a leader, and I wish I won because this is what I'm so passionate about. Yeah. But I think it has to go back to the classroom, where the young white children learn together with the black kids, and then internalize that, and then that can be impactful in the future, I think. That's what I think. A wonderful panelist, honestly. I don't think I can add anything more to that.
No, thank you so
Yeah,
much.
amazing. Thank you.
If I could, I think it's also important to remember, like when we talk about the Black community in Canada, or here even in Edmonton, Alberta, we often only reference the Caribbean and Africa. There's a third group that is quite often left out and not talked about, and those were the guys that came up after slavery, turn of the century, to Amber Valley and those places, the Lipscombs, the Beavers. Those families were like pioneers of this area, the Black population. And a lot of times they get left off the bill, and that leads to further divide. If you sit down and talk to Ms. Beaver, you know, she has a wealth of information, but you can also hear in her voice the fact that she's often left out of these moments, of these conversations. And so it's also important to remember from an education standpoint to make sure that that group that were here in the 1900s, when, you know, that's the first time anyone up here probably saw a black person, is also part of the story, you know, that we tell.
Sure. And that's really just building on what Greg has said. Taking a look at the curriculum that was proposed to come in for our, I believe it's our K-6. I've had an opportunity to do quite a bit of work on that.